isolation. It is connected to a long, sad, heinous history of violence in this country. And violence that just doesn't start in 2018. If justice is to be done to it, must be connected to events that have happened in our history. And I would like to submit, Mr. Chairperson, if you look at our history, 1880, sorry, from 1888, when King Lobengula signed the Moffat Treaty, this country has not gone for a period of more than 15 years uninterrupted without violence, without force being used against the people of Zimbabwe. And I'm going to quickly run through this historical just to illustrate that this, at all material times, has been a very violent state, in respect of which coercion is followed by the RAD concession, followed by the granting of a royal charter to the British Southern African Company, BSAC, led by Cecil John Rhodes. The charter gave the Cecil Rhodes, or his company, the capacity to pass ordinances or law in this country. It also gave him the unfettered right over our land and over our minerals. And so soon after the granting of this charter in 1889, an entire army was unleashed on the people of Zimbabwe from Matabeleland all the way to what was then known as Mashonaland. So violence was at the genesis of 1896. That's violence. This violence, Comrade Chairperson, continued all the way to 1912. And in 1914, the various contestations between black people who were saying this is our land, and prompting the Rhodesian regime to appoint what was called the Morris Carter Commission. And the Morris Carter Commission was determining the question of whether, number one, blacks should be allowed to own land. Number two, whether whites should own land with the black people side by side, or whether whites should own land on their own, solely and exclusively. The results of the Morris Carter Commission is that whites should own land own land exclusively on their own. The findings of the Morris Carter Commission were codified in a law, Comrade Chairperson. That law is known as the Land Apportionment Act of 1931. It totally dispossessed black people in this country. Violence started again. There were armed skirmishes across the length and breadth of this country. And it was the military, the colonial military, that was used with great force to subjugate a protesting black population. That the emergence of the colonial state also coincided with the emergence of black labor. As way back as 1894, they introduced a hard tax where black people were asked to pay 10 pence, but you could only get 10 pence if you were going to work in a farm, in a mine. So by the 40s, there were now serious black unions in this country, with the main one led by a man called Benjamin Burombo, who organized the protest in Wange in 1944. That strike, Mr. Chairperson, was the genesis of the nascent nationalist movement, which would then be led by Joshua Ngomo in the 50s. So we have never known peace. It has always been violence, with the state using violence against the black population. The nationalist movement, the organized nationalist movement, saw the execution of the War of Liberation starting in the late 50s, the early 60s, until the colonial establishment here, or the white establishment here, broke away from the colonial establishment by unilaterally declaring independence on the 11th of November 1965. UDI, as we call it, just accelerated violence. And so we had a war of liberation that only ended in 1979 and left a black one, just succeeded another one, the White Army, without the infrastructure of cohesion, of centralism being decimated, which is why, Comrade Chairperson, the first threat that the post-independent government faced in 1982, the challenges of so-called dissidents, and I use that word with great circumspection and apology, they responded in a military way. It happened on the 1st of August 2018. But I think that something is wrong with our country, that we have not had a commission of inquiry, a public commission of inquiry, happening where over 20,000 people lost their life. There's something wrong there, and very wrong, Comrade Chairperson. So 30,000 people were killed by the army, led by the 5th Brigade, some of whose commanders are sitting in the present-day government. Directed by cabinet ministers, some of whom are sitting in the present-day government. And again, you can see the gap if you were counting the periods. You can see, unfortunately, that we have never had more than 15 years of uninterrupted peace since 1888. And in fact, Mr. Chairman, if you had time, I would actually argue that we have never had peace since 1450. It has just been violence. It has just been violence. So after Gukura Wundi, and I want to say that between 1980 and 1990, was supporting Bishop Mzoliwa's UANC. This is something that I personally witnessed as a little boy in the ghetto. So they've always been political violence in this country. Despite the bigger picture of Gukura Wundi, there were these side stories and side shows that have been taking place in our country. Then you had, Mr. Chairperson, the violence associated with our land reform program. And I submit that whilst no one can question the imperative of land reform in this country, I would like to submit that the violence that associated our land reform program was totally unnecessary. Absolutely unnecessary. The formation of the MDC as the first real threat from an organized democratic political opposition ushered into Zimbabwe a new kind of violence. A new kind of violence. And that violence starts after the constitutional referendum that was held on the 10th and 11th of February 2000. We had a constitutional referendum, Comrade Chairperson, and a civic society. We organized ourselves in a civic body known as the National Constitutional Assembly. And the referendum had a simple question, yes or no. Yes to those who wanted a commission that had been prepared by a commission of inquiry chaired by 2000. The first farm occupations took place a few days later on the 14th of February against our movement. We went to an election on the 26th of June 2000, where our young movement did extremely well. Out of the contested 120 seats, we actually won 58 seats. But ZANU only managed to get a decent majority because at the time the president could appoint 20 extra members of parliament. And I need to say that we took, of the seats that we lost, we took 15 of them, or rather, we took many of them. We filed election petitions before the High Court of Zimbabwe. And at the High Court level, we actually won 15 election petitions. so that our result would have been 58 plus the 15, and would have been the majority party in 2000. But sadly, all our appeals, for reasons that I don't want to go to, were reversed. On appeal, all the 15 cases we had won at High Court level, we reversed. But I'm saying this to point out to the fact that when the presidential election that was held on the 11th of March 2002, given how well we had done as MDC, there was no one who doubted that Morgan Richard Changirai was going to win that election. Let it be known that the highest office in the land is a straitjacket whose occupant is expected to observe the objectives of the liberation struggle. We will therefore not accept, let alone support or salute anyone with a different agenda that threatens the very existence of our sovereignty, our country, and our people. So, we speak about the coup that happened in November of 2017, Comrade Chair. I would like to submit that this statement was actually the first coup or the first preemptive coup that this saw in March 2002. And you know, Mr. Chairperson, that President Mbeki appointed a commission of inquiry led by General Kampepe into the 2002 election, which was released. Your government, the South African government, didn't want to release it, but fortunately litigation released it. And the findings of the Kampepe report was that the election was not free and fair, and that Morgan Changirai would have won that election, the 2002 election. And these statements, Comrade Chairperson, have been repeated over and over again. On the 29th of November 2010, the Commissioner General of the Police, Augustine Chihuli, I don't know where he is at the present moment. And I'm not sure whether he still believes in this statement, but he stated as follows: this country came through blood and the barrel of a gun, and it will never be recolonized through a simple pen which costs as little as 5 cents. That's a member of the security forces who, in terms of section 206 of our constitution, must be neutral, must be impartial, and serves the state, not a political party. I've got another statement made by Brigadier General Douglas Nikayaramba, or a similar statement by ZANU-PF in Murombezi this very Saturday, this past Saturday. The Vice President of the country, the esteemed Chiwenga, General Chiwenga, made more or less the same statements that Advocate Nelson Chamisa and others like myself are daydreamers. That there is no vacancy and there will never be a vacancy in the presidency. So this is consistent. This is consistent, Comrade Chairperson. That movement was on constitutionalism. That movement was founded on peace. That movement was founded on the rule of law. And it had to be, historically, Mr. Chairperson, because what we were fighting, what we were trying to remove was violence, was constitutionalism, was the abuse of the rule of law. So the MDC could never have been anything else, because the mischief that led to the formation of the MDC was this wrong, terrible picture of violence, of capture, of a predatory state, of a toxic state. And so, despite temptations, we've remained loyal to the values of peaceful, democratic change in Zimbabwe. And we've refused, Comrade Chairperson, we've refused the temptation, because oftentimes the path to democracy becomes long and painful. Oftentimes it becomes very painful. And our struggle has been long. We've been in the trenches since 1999. So oftentimes it's easy to forget the bigger picture. But we have refused and remained steadfast in the path of peaceful change, democratic change to our country. Mr. Chairperson, I've got a roll of honor. We call it the roll. This list has got over 3,000 people that we have lost over the years at the hands of ZANU. And can I be allowed to submit the same as Exhibit A? A High Court judgment. Notwithstanding that High Court judgment, there has not been a prosecution to this very day. And I know that Piri is roaming somewhere in Chipinge. I think he's farming in Chipinge. I don't know where Kitsia Tota is, but he's roaming somewhere in Zimbabwe. There's been no prosecution. Another sad case, Mr. Chairperson, is the case of Tonderai Sergeant Ndira, a brilliant, fine young man who hailed from the dusty town of Mavugo. He was abducted in 2008 during the runoff to the June 2008 election. In 2008. His lawyers at the time, Advocate Mteto is here, what we call in our law a habeas corpus, which is an application for the release of someone who has disappeared. So on their way to argue this habeas corpus, news reached the lawyers that Tonderai Ndira's father has identified through that we call it a Bengo in this part of the world. The matter was heard before Justice Ben Pachwai. She said, in the year of our Lord 2008, headlands. What Mr. Chironga Constitution, Comrade Chair, there is a provision in section 210 of the Constitution of the setting up for the Constitutional Court. I have a special interest in bringing the instant application.